The water in my pool was neon green, like someone dumped in a 5-gallon bucket of antifreeze and stirred. That's when Karen walked through my side gate like she owned the place, folder in hand, smiling like this was some kind of favor. Then she said the words that almost made me laugh out loud. "Your pool is now property of the HOA." When I bought this place, I wasn't thinking about drama. I just wanted a yard, a little privacy, and a pool where my kid could burn off energy without being glued to a screen all day. Nothing crazy. I'm not one of those guys trying to build a jungle gym or an outdoor bar with flashing lights and Bluetooth speakers. I'm just a single dad with a 13-year-old boy and a full-time job that leaves me fried by the end of the day. A backyard and a pool felt like a little corner of peace I could actually control. The pool was already here when I moved in, built by the original owner back in the early 2000s. A little rough around the edges, sure, but structurally sound. I patched it up, redid the tiles, replaced the old filter, and built a small deck alongside it with some nice weatherproof chairs I grabbed on sale from Lowe's. My kid Luke called it Dad's Resort, which cracked me up because it was basically a rectangle of water and a chair with a cup holder. Still, it was ours. Luke's not the most social kid in the world, kinda quiet, gets anxious around big crowds. But when we moved in, he actually started inviting friends over. Couple of kids from down the street, good boys, polite, didn't break anything. They'd spend hours in the pool playing some weird hybrid of water polo and Mario Kart. I'd be inside, working or making dinner, checking on them now and then through the kitchen window. Never had a single issue, no injuries, no noise complaints, nothing broken. And to be totally honest, it felt good, like I was doing something right, you know? After the divorce, it was rough for a while. I mean, I don't need to dump my life story here, but let's just say there were some messy years. The kind where you forget what normal even looks like. So just seeing Luke laugh like that, laugh in that free, wide-open way kids only do when they feel totally safe, that was everything to me. That little backyard became the first place since the split where it felt like life was actually going forward again instead of just pausing. I'd mow the lawn, skim the pool, throw on music from my old speaker when nobody else was outside. I liked keeping the space up. There's something meditative about cleaning a pool, watching all the leaves swirl into the skimmer, the sound of the water sloshing when you brush down the sides. Weirdly peaceful. I'd be out there thinking about work stuff, bills, maybe texting Luke's mom to coordinate pickups, just regular stuff, life stuff. The HOA wasn't even on my radar back then. I mean, yeah, I paid my dues. It was baked into the mortgage. I got their flyers in the mail like everyone else. Newsletters about bake sales and holiday lights and a reminder once about keeping your bins out of sight. Whatever. They weren't in my face, and I wasn't in theirs. And I liked that. I liked minding my business and being left alone. The whole reason I bought into this neighborhood was because it felt calm, not like one of those Stepford communities where everyone peeks through the blinds and files noise complaints if your wind chimes are too loud. It was just quiet. Until it wasn't. And funny enough, the very first time I saw Karen, she was smiling. Of course she was. Not the warm kind of smile. The other one. The kind you see on someone who just finished organizing a file cabinet and feels morally superior for it. She had that clipboard energy. Everything about her said, "I alphabetize my spices and judge people who don't." She showed up at my door one afternoon with a packet in her hands and introduced herself as the newly elected HOA board chair. Said she was going around to get to know everyone better. I remember thinking, we've lived here for years and never seen you once. But okay. She asked a few neighborly questions, most of them weirdly focused on the pool. Was it up to code? Had it been recently inspected? Did I keep track of who used it and when? I told her yes, and no, because it's a pool, not a daycare. She nodded like she was jotting down notes in her head. Then she smiled again and said something that didn't sit right. It's wonderful that you're willing to share it with the neighborhood kids. So rare these days. I told her I wasn't sharing it exactly, that my son invited a few friends sometimes, sure, but this was private property. She tilted her head like a parrot hearing a new sound, then let out this little laugh and said, "Oh, of course, I didn't mean anything by it." She did, and I should have known right then that smile was the opening shot. A couple weeks after Karen's little meet and greet, I got an envelope in the mail with the HOA logo on it. Not a bill, not a newsletter, an actual letter, addressed directly to me. That already felt weird. Inside was a formal-looking note printed on thick paper like they thought that made it more legitimate, with a headline in bold, "Notice of Informal Inquiry, Use of Private Recreational Structures," which, let's be honest, is a fancy way of saying we're sniffing around where we don't belong. The letter said the HOA had received several inquiries about the pool, mostly concerning clarity of access and whether it was designated for private or shared use under the guidelines. And let me tell you, that phrasing? Clarity of access made me pause. It didn't accuse me of anything. It didn't ask me to do anything. It just planted a seed, like a polite little landmine. At first, I laughed it off. I even called my buddy Tyrell, who lives 3 houses down, and read the letter to him. He told me it sounded like Karen was trying to make a move, said she'd pulled something similar a year ago when someone down the street put up a playset and let neighbor kids use it. According to him, she tried to argue that it became common use because of repeated community access. That case fizzled out because the guy's sister was a paralegal and sent one very aggressive letter, but still, the idea that Karen had a playbook freaked me out a little. So I went out to the garage that night and pulled out the box with all my house documents, permits, survey maps, maintenance records, everything. I double-checked that my property line went clean around the pool, which it did. I had permits for the deck. I even had photos of me rebuilding the edge tile with Luke helping me hold the dam leveler, just in case. Then I did what any normal person would do. I ignored the letter. Because what else do you do with a passive-aggressive memo that doesn't ask for anything specific? I wasn't about to reply like I was guilty of something. I hadn't broken a rule. The pool was mine. The fence was mine. The kids swimming in it were invited. Period. A few days later, I noticed Karen standing near the corner of my property on the sidewalk, not doing anything, just watching, clipboard in hand. I waved. She waved back. Didn't say a word. That was the first time I started locking the side gate. Not because of Karen, not exactly. More like a gut thing. Something about that look on her face, like she was adding things up in her head, like she thought she had time on her side. And maybe she did. I don't know. But it was the first time I felt like my home, my actual home, wasn't entirely mine anymore. Not because anyone took it, but because someone was starting to act like they had a say in it. And that feeling didn't go away. It just got louder. It started small. That's how they always get you. Not with a wrecking ball, but with a nudge that feels too petty to fight. First, I got a reminder in the mail about noise ordinances. There was no citation, no complaint listed, just a friendly note saying that certain hours were designated quiet time and pool use should respect shared community standards. I asked Luke if anything got out of hand when his friends were over. He looked at me like I'd just accused him of lighting fireworks off the diving board. And I believe him. I'm home most of the time, and those kids are pretty chill. But suddenly, I found myself turning the music down, even though it was barely above dad volume. I started watching the clock every time someone splashed too loud. I started second-guessing myself, and that's exactly what Karen wanted. Then came the survey. I found a flyer taped to my mailbox, not in it, taped to it, with a cheerful headline, "A Community Interest Poll, Recreational Resource Access." It had a stock photo of some kids playing in a pool. Not my pool, but one that looked a whole lot like it. There were a few generic questions about whether residents would like a shared pool in the neighborhood, if they'd be willing to contribute dues toward its maintenance, and whether it made sense to formalize access to existing water recreation amenities. That was the actual phrase. Formalize access. I nearly choked. I texted Tyrell a picture of the flyer and he replied, "Bro, she's circling. Watch your back." I tried not to lose it. I really did. I wanted to believe it was just Karen playing politics, that it was annoying but harmless. But then one of Luke's friends, nice kid named Connor, told me his mom had heard from a neighbor that there might be rules soon about which kids are allowed in the pool. I asked him what he meant, and he said, "I don't know. My mom said something about wristbands. I think Karen talked to her." Wristbands. For my backyard. I laughed when he said it, but inside I felt something twist. Because once people start treating your private space like it's a public service, it's only a matter of time before they start making rules for it. And Karen wasn't just poking around anymore, she was recruiting. Spreading just enough concern to get people thinking, maybe the HOA should be involved. Maybe it's not fair that one person has something the rest of us don't. Then came the bogus complaints. Within a week, I got 3 letters. One said that there had been reports of kids unsupervised near the pool. Another said there were concerns about the safety of my fencing. The last one was the real kicker, a citation for unauthorized use of a personal structure for community purposes without proper board review. I called the number on the letter and asked them what the hell that even meant. The lady on the other end put me on hold for 5 minutes, came back, and told me she'd have someone follow up. No one ever did. That's when I went out and bought new locks for both gates, just to be safe. I installed a second camera overlooking the pool, not because I thought someone would try to sneak in, but because I no longer trusted that someone wouldn't. I stopped inviting people over. Luke did too. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell he was embarrassed, ashamed, like we'd done something wrong just by having a pool in our own backyard. I caught him once staring at it from his window, arms crossed, like it didn't belong to us anymore, and it pissed me off. So I started pushing back. I wrote a formal response to the board, citing every property line, every permit, every zoning code I could find. I copied my survey map. I included photos. I even invited them to come inspect the property if they had actual concerns. No one responded, but a week later, someone knocked over our trash cans. Didn't steal anything, didn't spray paint, just knocked them over and left them like that. At 2 a.m. I know because my new camera caught it. 2 figures in hoodies walking along the sidewalk, one veering off and tipping the bins with a quick shove. The next morning, I found another note from the HOA in the mailbox. Please remember to keep waste containers properly secured to avoid neighborhood disruption. That's when I realized they weren't trying to take my pool. They were trying to wear me down until I gave it up myself. I didn't want a war. I mean, who does, right? Especially with the HOA. That's not some fight you win with brute force. It's all forms and bylaws and meetings where everyone pretends they're not lying through their teeth. I just wanted my life back, my backyard, my peace. So I figured, okay, maybe it's not too late to stop this thing before it gets worse. First thing I did was try the civil route. I emailed the board, not just Karen, the entire list. I copied the address from the HOA welcome packet and wrote this carefully worded message. No caps lock, no sarcasm, no "what the hell is wrong with you people?" Just calm, clear, professional. I said I wanted to clear up any confusion about the use of my private pool, that it was strictly personal, and that I had no intention of turning it into anything public or community-based. I attached copies of my permits, the survey map again, and even offered to meet in person if they wanted to discuss things like adults. You want to guess how many responses I got? 0. Not even a generic "thanks for reaching out." Nothing, just silence. And then, this part still blows my mind. They published the next HOA newsletter, and right there in the middle of it, under community safety notes, was this gem: "We remind residents that recreational water facilities should not be accessible to the public without proper HOA oversight. Families are encouraged to report any instances of informal gatherings that may pose safety or liability risks." They didn't name me. Of course not. That would have been too obvious. But come on, who else in the neighborhood has a pool? One other guy, 4 blocks down, and he keeps it covered year-round. This was aimed at me. Thinly veiled, but obvious as hell. That's when I started calling around. First, the city. I spoke to a zoning guy who sounded more confused than I was. He said if the pool's on my property, permitted and fenced in, then it's private. That's it. End of story. He said the HOA can't reclassify my property without a legal mechanism, and that doesn't exist unless I willingly turn it over or violate some clear rule, which I hadn't. So I asked him if there was any way to file a complaint against an HOA that's harassing a homeowner. He said that was complicated and I'd probably want to talk to an attorney. Translation: good luck, buddy. Next I went to a lawyer. I don't make lawyer money, but I figured I'd pay for one consult just to see where I stood. Found a guy online who had a whole section on HOA disputes. He was sharp, calm, didn't talk down to me. I explained everything. The letters, the fake complaints, the surveys, the newsletters, all of it. I even brought the video of the guys knocking over my trash cans. He watched everything, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Okay, first of all, you're not crazy." That alone was worth the price of admission. He told me I had a solid case for harassment if things escalated, but unless the HOA physically damaged something or issued a formal order I could challenge, I'd just be swinging at smoke. Most of what they'd done so far was aggravating, but technically within the bounds of communication. He said if they ever crossed the line, like trespassed or tried to restrict access, that's when I'd have leverage. Until then, I was basically on defense. So that's what I did. I played defense. I made a binder, no joke, like an actual binder, labeled it Pool HOA BS. Inside, I put every letter, every email, every flyer, every screenshot of every passive-aggressive newsletter quote. I dated everything. I wrote down incidents. I saved footage from my cameras. I treated my own home like a crime scene, just in case I ever needed to prove I wasn't imagining this whole thing. I even talked to a couple neighbors, quietly, not to stir anything up. Just casual driveway conversations. Most of them were sympathetic. A few had their own stories about Karen. Nothing as extreme, but enough to make me feel like I wasn't alone. Problem was, no one wanted to get involved. Not directly. they'd say, "Man, that's messed up," and then quickly change the subject. One guy actually said, "Yeah, but she'll be off the board eventually, right?" I wish. Meanwhile, Luke started pulling away. He stopped inviting his friends, stopped asking to swim. One night, I caught him draining the pool halfway because he thought it might help if it looked less inviting. I nearly lost it. Not at him, at all of it. The whole damn thing. This was supposed to be our safe place. Not some battleground over who gets to splash around in a backyard that I pay for, I maintain. I built into something good after everything went sideways in our lives, and now my own kid was treating it like a liability. I kept telling myself it would blow over, that Karen would move on to some other poor soul, that the board would lose interest, that if I just kept being reasonable, eventually they'd have to be reasonable too. But that's not how people like Karen work. They don't want peace, they want submission, and they don't stop until you either give up or give them a reason to wish they hadn't pushed so hard. I didn't hear them at first. That's the part that stuck with me. No sound, just the faintest splash like someone flipping over a sandal in the water. I was on the couch, lights low, half asleep with a documentary playing, when something about that sound made my brain click back on. It wasn't a raccoon. It wasn't the wind. It was wrong. I got up and walked to the window over the sink. The floodlight in the backyard was off, but I could still make out shapes, 2 of them, moving along the edge of the pool. Fast, like they knew exactly what they were doing. One held something bulky, a container, the other had a flashlight but kept it low, pointed at the ground. And then they poured. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies, no evil laughter, no yelling, just this heavy glug 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 of something thick hitting the water, followed by ripples stretching across the pool. They didn't run when they were done. They walked out, calm, like they'd just finished mowing someone's lawn. I stood there frozen for maybe 30 seconds, just trying to process what I'd seen. Then I snapped into gear, bolted for the side door, and ran out barefoot, grabbing the flashlight I keep on the counter. By the time I got outside, they were gone. No tire squeal, no engine, nothing. Just quiet, the kind that makes your skin crawl. The smell hit me first. Sharp, chemical, almost sweet like glue. I pointed the flashlight into the water and felt my stomach drop. It looked like a bucket of toxic waste. Not just cloudy, glowing. Like someone had poured neon paint into it and stirred. There were oily swirls along the surface and little bubbles rising near the filter like the pool was rotting from the inside out. I didn't touch it. I didn't drain it. I didn't even go back inside right away. I just stood there for a while, trying to calm my hands down and make sure I wasn't going to throw up. Eventually, I went inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened the camera feed. I keep 3 cameras, one on the side gate, one above the back deck, and one that faces the pool. All motion activated, all time stamped. And sure enough, there they were. 2 figures in hoodies, faces mostly obscured, slipping through the gate that I know I locked. One carried a jug, the other carried 2. They poured fast, then walked off through the alley behind the fence. I didn't sleep at all. I just watched that footage on loop over and over, trying to figure out if there was anything I missed. A license plate, a face, a logo on a hoodie, anything. I made 6 different still frames from the clearest angle I could get and dropped them into a folder on my desktop labeled HOA Incident, Pool Contamination. The next morning, I called the non-emergency police line. I didn't expect much, and I was right. They were polite, but clearly not interested. Said it sounded like a civil matter unless I could prove malicious intent or trespassing. I asked them if video footage of strangers dumping unknown chemicals into my backyard pool in the middle of the night counted. The officer on the line made a vague noise and said they'd make a note and suggested I file a property damage report online. I did. Still haven't heard back. About an hour after that, Karen showed up. She didn't knock. She came in through the side gate again, the same one they used. She had a folder under her arm and a bright pink post-it stuck to the front. She smiled when she saw me like we were picking up a conversation we'd paused yesterday. "I'm here to notify you," she said, flipping the folder open, "that the HOA will be taking custodial responsibility for your pool until its condition can be brought back up to code." I just stared at her. My brain stalled. My mouth literally wouldn't form words. She kept going. There have been multiple concerns raised about safety, water quality, and unauthorized use, and after yesterday's events, she said it like it was a thunderstorm, it's clear that the current arrangement isn't sustainable. So, in accordance with Section 7B of the Community Guidelines, the HOA will be assuming responsibility to prevent further liability to the neighborhood. I finally found my voice. "You're not serious." Her face didn't even twitch. "I'm delivering official notice," she said, and she placed the folder down on my patio table like she was dropping off a muffin basket. You'll receive a formal copy by mail, but we wanted to move quickly given the circumstances." Then she smiled again and turned to leave, calm as ever, as if she hadn't just told me that the HOA was claiming ownership of something on my property that I paid for, that she knew damn well someone had sabotaged the night before. And that's when it hit me. She knew. She knew what happened. Maybe she didn't order it herself, or maybe she did, but she knew. That little smirk, that way she framed it as if it were some freak accident. She knew exactly what was poured into my pool because this was the move she'd been waiting for, the excuse she needed. She didn't need me to break the rules. She just needed the situation to look broken enough to step in. And now she had it. I didn't say a word for the rest of that day. Karen walked out of my yard like she'd just handed me a birthday card, and I just stood there staring at that folder on my patio table like it might start hissing. I didn't open it, not right away. I just sat in one of the chairs, pool still reeking behind me, and let the quiet eat everything. Luke wasn't home. I didn't text anyone. I didn't even check my phone. Because something cracked open in my head. Not a breakdown, more like a gear finally grinding into place. I'd spent the last couple of months trying to reason with someone who wasn't playing the same game. I was handing in homework. She was lighting the chalkboard on fire. And now she'd gone too far. Whatever hesitation I had, whatever quiet little voice in my head that kept saying, just let it go, it was gone, burned off in that chemical soup she let into my pool. So I did what I always do when something breaks. I started pulling it apart piece by piece. First, the footage. I backed it up to 3 separate drives, 1 local, 2 cloud, in case anyone suddenly got curious about deleting things. I time-stamped it, pulled the clearest frames I could, and ran them through a couple of basic enhancement tools I found online. Didn't get faces, but the silhouettes were clear and you could see the jugs. One of them had a little torn label, not readable, but visible. That'd matter later. Next, I opened the HOA folder. 6 pages. It wasn't a formal transfer of ownership because even Karen's brand of delusion doesn't go that far. It was a temporary custodial oversight directive, basically the HOA saying they'd be managing the pool until further notice due to health and liability concerns. No legal order, no judge, just a bunch of official-sounding language on HOA letterhead and a page at the end where I was invited to acknowledge the notice with a signature. I laughed so hard I actually scared my dog. Then I called Bethany. Bethany and I hadn't talked in a couple years. We went to college together, lost touch after the whole divorce mess, but I always remembered she worked in property law. Nothing big, just a small firm upstate. I didn't even know if she'd take the call. But she picked up on the second ring, and I swear the second I said, "I think I need help with my HOA," she said, "Say no more. What did those psychos do?" I told her everything, all of it. The letters, the flyers, the trash can incident, the kids, the survey, the pool sabotage, the fake oversight order. She listened without interrupting, and when I finally stopped, she said, "Yeah, that's war." She explained that the HOA had zero right to manage a private pool, that any damage or contamination caused by third parties would only justify me restricting access, not them taking it. And the most important part, if I could even suggest that someone connected to the HOA had tampered with my property, then any action they took afterward looked like motive. A setup. We spent the next hour building a list of what I had and what I needed. Footage? Check. Physical damage? Check. Pattern of harassment? Oh yeah. What we didn't have yet was a direct link, something that tied the sabotage to the board. But she said that even without it, I had enough for a formal complaint with the state HOA oversight board. And better, if we filed a police report and a claim with my insurance company, it would put real pressure on the HOA to back off, because if it turned into a lawsuit, they'd be the ones on the hook. I felt like I could breathe again, just a little. The next day, I walked over to Tyrell's place. I told him what happened, showed him the footage, and asked if he'd be willing to sign a statement confirming some of the weird stuff he'd seen Karen doing over the months. At first he hesitated, not because he didn't believe me, but because he knew how this stuff could snowball. But after watching the video twice, he looked at me and said, "You know what? Screw her." Turns out, Tyrell used to be on the HOA board, years ago, back when it was mostly retirees who just wanted to make sure kids didn't break sprinklers. He'd left after Karen came in and started treating the bylaws like the Constitution. But, and here's the kicker, he kept a lot of the old documentation. Meeting notes, original copies of the rules, email threads. One of those threads, a conversation between Karen and 2 other board members talking about the potential value of transitioning private resources into community assets. She'd been planning this for a long time. I sent everything to Bethany. She was practically vibrating through the phone, said if we timed it right, we could send a formal cease and desist to the HOA, alert the local news. She even had a reporter friend who hated HOAs and would love this story, and file complaints with both the state and our county housing oversight office. She told me we were building a pressure sandwich. I didn't ask what that meant, but I liked how it sounded. Then she said the one thing that really locked me in. Do you want this to stop, or do you want to make sure she never tries this on anyone else again? I told her I wanted both, so we got to work. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. Not Luke, not my neighbors, not even Tyrell once we had the documents. There was something kind of satisfying about keeping it all close to the chest for once. After weeks of feeling like I was just reacting to every little jab Karen threw my way, it felt good to finally hold the knife by the handle instead of the blade. Bethany drafted the cease and desist letter. It was beautiful, sharp, no filler, just a straight-up legal punch to the throat. It laid out every instance of overreach, harassment, false communication, and intimidation tactics the HOA had used. She cited the footage, the flyers, the contamination, the so-called custodial oversight directive, which in her words had no legal standing in any jurisdiction that hasn't fully surrendered to mob rule. She has a flair. We sent it to every board member, certified mail. Copies also went to the HOA's insurance provider. Yeah, turns out Bethany found out who underwrites their liability coverage. Apparently insurers hate when the groups they cover get caught pretending they own things they don't. Then we filed the police report. I'd already done the online version, but Bethany insisted I go in person with the footage and a sworn statement. So I did. I sat in a windowless room in a little precinct office with a young officer who looked like he thought this was beneath him until he saw the footage. His whole vibe shifted. He asked me to email it directly to him. I did. He said they'd take a look and get back to me. And then, just to top it all off, we submitted a formal complaint to the state HOA regulatory office and included a neat little package of everything. I'm talking the full paper trail, emails, letters, footage, photos, highlighted bylaws. Bethany called it turning up the heat before the boil. I called it finally punching back. Now, here's the thing. I expected Karen to come out swinging. I expected rage, threats, some kind of messy, loud tantrum. What I got was worse. Silence. Complete and total. Radio. Silence. No calls, no letters, no HOA newsletters with passive-aggressive reminders about pool safety. Just nothing. Which, if you've ever dealt with people like Karen, you know that silence isn't peace. It's a strategy. So I stayed ready. And then the first crack showed. One of the other board members, some guy named Greg I'd never even spoken to, dropped a flyer in my mailbox. A personal one. Just a folded piece of paper that said there was going to be an emergency HOA board session, open to residents, to discuss recent community concerns and governance expectations. Which in HOA speak meant shit's going down. So I went. Tyrell came with me. Bethany couldn't make it in person, but she coached me through what to say, what not to say, and how to not get baited. The meeting was held in the little clubhouse near the front of the neighborhood. Folding chairs, bad lighting, one of those plug-in air fresheners that smells like dryer sheets and desperation. Maybe 20 people showed up, including the board. Karen walked in last. She looked smaller. Not physically, but something in her energy was off. No clipboard, no heels, no smug smile. She took a seat and avoided eye contact. Greg stood up and read a short statement about community transparency and recent events that have caused confusion and discomfort. Then he opened the floor. Nobody said anything for a second. So I stood up. I didn't go in guns blazing. I just calmly, clearly laid it out. I said I was a homeowner, that I maintained my own property, that the HOA had no authority to manage or reclassify privately owned structures, that I had evidence of coordinated harassment and property sabotage, that I had already filed complaints with the state, local authorities, and the HOA's insurance provider, and that, unless the board issued a formal retraction and ceased all related actions, my attorney was fully prepared to proceed. I didn't name Karen. I didn't have to. Everyone looked at her, and that's when she made her move, or more accurately, tried to. She stood up and said, with this tight, defensive tone, that any actions taken were in the spirit of community cohesion and safety, and that certain miscommunications had been regrettably interpreted as overreach. She used those exact words. Regrettably interpreted. Then she pivoted into victim mode, said that she had been receiving threats, that this issue had become politicized, and that she was deeply hurt by the level of hostility directed at the board. Someone near the back actually coughed bullshit under their breath, and just like that, the room turned. Neighbors started asking questions. Not just about me, about other letters they'd gotten, about that community garden Karen had pushed for that never materialized, even though funds were approved, about a new HOA contractor Karen had personally recommended and whether that was her cousin. And Karen, for the first time since this all started, didn't have answers. She looked cornered, flustered. Greg eventually had to step in and wrap the meeting before it completely collapsed, but the damage was done. She didn't control the room anymore. She didn't control anything anymore. And for the first time in months, I walked home with a smile on my face. I didn't plan for it to go public. Honestly, I just wanted her to back off. Stop messing with my life. Stop screwing with my kid. Stop treating our backyard like some community vending machine. But once that board meeting happened, once people started really asking questions out loud, it was like someone pulled the cork out of a bottle that had been shaking for months. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a reporter, a local guy, freelance, but he wrote for a few of those regional outlets that cover HOA corruption and local government drama. Apparently, one of the other board members leaked my cease and desist letter and video footage. I wasn't mad. In fact, I had a pretty good guess who it was. Greg looked like he'd had enough of Karen, too. The reporter was polite, direct, and absolutely giddy about the story. HOA tries to seize private pool after alleged sabotage incident. That's how he pitched it. I told him I wasn't sure about putting my name on it, especially for Luke's sake. He said that was fine. He'd run it with some redactions if I wanted. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, screw it. Let people know. Let them see. We weren't the first people Karen had steamrolled, and we probably wouldn't be the last unless someone hit the brakes hard enough to leave a dent. So I said yes. We talked for an hour. I gave him the documents, the screenshots, the video stills. I even sent him a photo of the folder Karen left on my patio table. He asked if I had a quote. I gave him one. They didn't just try to take the pool. They tried to make me question whether I had the right to defend what's mine. He loved it. The story went up on 3 local sites. Then it hit Reddit. Not by me, I swear. And from there, it blew up. I started getting messages from people I didn't even know. Neighbors, people from the next city over. Some guy from Arizona who said his HOA tried to claim his shed belonged to the community because it was visible from the walking path. A woman from Florida who said Karen sounded exactly like her HOA president, right down to the clipboard and the fake smiles. The story grew legs. One of those local TV stations picked it up. You know the ones with the dramatic voiceovers and shots of angry homeowners standing next to fences. They came out and filmed a segment right there on my deck. I almost didn't agree to it, but Bethany said the more light we shine, the harder it is for them to crawl back into the shadows. She was right. Karen? She disappeared. Not literally, but socially. The board froze her out. She stopped showing up to meetings. Word spread fast about the pool and even faster about the money stuff. Remember that little community garden no one ever saw? Yeah, turns out the funds for that had been quietly moved into a contractor account tied to a business her nephew started last year. Greg found the receipts. He didn't even have to dig that hard. The board held a vote. Karen was officially removed for misconduct. No shouting, no resistance. She didn't even show up to defend herself. I heard she moved out a few weeks later. Rumor was she'd been planning it for a while, figured she'd consolidate power, flip the house, and ride off into the HOA sunset. Instead, she got torched on 3 platforms and dumped by her own people. Oh, and the custodial oversight document. Legally voided. The HOA had to issue a written statement clarifying that they have no authority over private recreational structures, ever, under any circumstances. That went out in the next community bulletin, right next to a note about the spring chili cook-off. You know what else came in that week? A letter from their insurance provider. One of those polite, official ones with too much white space and just enough legal weight to make your throat go dry. They were reviewing the association's ongoing eligibility for coverage due to potential liabilities arising from recent actions taken by members of the board. I framed it. Dead serious. It's hanging in my garage above the breaker panel. It didn't just end the fight, it rewrote the rules for everyone on that street. Suddenly, people were speaking up. Tyrell put his grill back on the front porch. The lady 2 doors down repainted her shutters bright yellow and told me let them try something now. The board meetings got quieter, shorter, and a hell of a lot less smug. And the pool, still green for a while, took weeks of flushing, scrubbing, chemical balancing, and swearing under my breath at 3 a.m. But I got it back. And I made one tiny change. Just one. Mounted right there on the new fence gate, a metal sign I had custom made. Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be photographed, identified, and featured on the evening news. It was petty. It was glorious. And I have zero regrets. The pool looks perfect now. Blue, still, clean. The kind of water that makes you want to throw your phone in the grass and dive in without thinking. Luke was the first one back in. He cannonballed off the deep end like he was trying to erase the whole past year in one splash. His laugh cracked across the yard like it hadn't in months. Real, wide-open, belly-deep laughter. I sat back in the chair with my coffee and just watched. I didn't even realize I was smiling until my face started to hurt. Funny thing is, I don't even swim that often myself. Never really did. I built that pool up for him, and maybe for me, in a way I didn't admit at first. After the divorce, I needed something solid, something I could fix with my own 2 hands that would stay fixed. The pool became that thing, and Karen tried to twist it into some public resource, some HOA-branded playground she could put on her little neighborhood resume. But she underestimated one thing. You don't mess with something a dad built with his own hands for his kid. That stays sacred. The house feels lighter now. I don't flinch when the mail comes. I don't brace when a neighbor walks by. In fact, we talk more now. A couple of them even apologized, not because they were part of what happened, but because they hadn't stepped in. I get it. Fear is a hell of a silencer when you've got a mortgage and no time to spare. But now the street feels different. Less policed, more human. The HOA is still there, technically. They exist in the way a background noise exists. You know it's happening, but it doesn't bother you unless you focus too hard. Greg's running the board now, and he actually came over once just to shoot the breeze. No clipboard, no folders, just a guy with a beer and a story about how his sprinkler exploded during a freeze. We talked for an hour, no tension, no drama, just neighbors again. Bethany ended up turning the whole thing into a case study for a seminar she taught. She even thanked me for providing a textbook example of passive-aggressive tyranny turned actionable liability. Her words, not mine. She's good at what she does, and we've stayed in touch. Luke calls her Aunt Bethany now. I don't hate it. And me? I'm good. Not just not stressed good, actually good. Settled, like something clicked back into place after months of wobbling. I've got my routine again, work, dinner, the occasional lazy Saturday with music playing and the grill going. Sometimes I sit by the pool in the evening with a drink and watch the water catch the last of the light. It always looks like glass right before sundown. Still, perfect, undisturbed. And yeah, that sign's still there. People ask me sometimes if I'll take it down, if it feels petty, if it sends the wrong message. But here's the thing, it's not about Karen anymore. It's not even about the HOA. That sign is for me. A reminder that no matter how polite someone sounds, no matter how official the paper looks, if it walks into your yard and tries to take what's yours, you don't just give it away. You don't play nice while someone rearranges your life to suit their comfort. You push back. You dig in. Because the second you stop defending the little things, your yard, your peace, your name on the mailbox, it all starts to feel negotiable. And some things just aren't. Not now, not ever again.